And finally, when the evil witch had her way, she cut out the hearts of the three heroes, maniacally laughing, screeching,
I now have eternal immortality. I shall begin absorbing the children of the earth.
I wasn't expecting Kaz Delacroix to entertain himself by telling stories. I thought he was asleep, dozing on Rowan's shoulder. He started with TV episodes, Breaking Bad from memory, Game of Thrones from memory. But then he wandered into a territory a little too close to home. His latest story involved an evil witch cultist. Smooth, Kaz. Smooth. His voice for the witch was a little too cartoonish, but I weirdly enjoyed it. I thought they were talking to each other, which I couldn't allow, but Rowan was asleep. Kaz's stories had actually calmed him down. His head was bowed, his soft snores sending my heart into my throat. I wanted to untie his restraints, or at least loosen them. I wanted to let him shower, bring down fresh clothes from his room. I even found myself searching for ointment to soothe the markings on his arms. But helping them was one step closer to feeling empathy, and empathy would get my brother killed. I had known these people for too long, developing relationships and attachments that were never supposed to happen. Imogen Prairie had a heart of gold, which was her biggest flaw. She was too naive, immediately trusting me because I was from her classes. Imogen was a lonely girl, dumped by her parents at the age of 16 and forced to grow up way too young. She should have been smart, should have known that I wasn't a good person. Imogen should have known not to trust everyone and that doing so would get her hurt. And yet she welcomed me with a smile, not suspicious in the slightest. And yet, she welcomed me with a smile, not suspicious in the slightest. Imogen Prairie was the perfect vessel. The real world would eat her alive. Charlie Delacroix was the smart, level-headed one. The one I was keeping a close eye on. I was already mentally considering his vessel as one of 3 royals. Mom said that's what she was looking for. However, as a human, he was too clever, and if given the opportunity, Kaz could easily come up with an escape plan. I had to give him points for being the least frustrating out of the 3 of them, though. While Imogen sobbed and screamed threats at me, and Rowan tried to channel his inner Houdini to topple the 3 of them over, Kaz stayed calm and collected, reassuring them with hushed murmurs that everything was going to be okay. He may have had a cool demeanor, but when the boy did catch my eye, I saw the anger and resentment curled in his lip. He stopped the story, settling me with a smile. "Why don't I cook us all a meal?" he suggested, and I couldn't resist a smirk when just the mention of home-cooked food jolted Rowan's head of shaggy brown curls awake. "I mean, I love pizza, but not 4 times in a row." Kaz gestured to his bindings. "If you untie me, I promise, hand on heart, that I won't try anything." "I second that," Rowan mumbled under his gag. "I can't eat any more fucking garlic bread." "I thought you were asleep," Kaz murmured. "You're kidding. I want to know what happened to the evil witch." "It doesn't even matter," Imogen whispered. "She's going to kill us anyway." Rowan sighed, lightly knocking his head against hers. "Well, maybe I want to eat something home-cooked before my heart is ripped out by the evil witch." I had been scrolling through my phone, ironically, searching for recipes. They were right. I needed actual food, and whatever was in their pantry, a moldy banana, a single slice of bread, and a few dozen condiments, wasn't going to satisfy any of us. There was Uber Eats, but again, I don't think any of us wanted takeout. I stood from my chair, slowly making my way over to the 3 of them and grabbing my gun from the coffee table. The weapon had always felt wrong in my hand, like it didn't fit. I caught Rowan's eye, who twisted his head, his gaze glued to my gun. I wasn't expecting his lips to curve into the smallest of smiles under the duct tape gag, like he knew something I didn't. Kaz didn't look scared. His smile, when I tore off his gag, was genuine, and I hated that despite everything I had done to these kids. Somehow they were still trying to be civil. I can make us something home-cooked. His smile broadened. You need us to stay healthy, right? For when you sacrifice us to your moon goddess. He really was listening. I wasn't delusional. So he had paid attention when I was talking about how beautiful she was, how they were going to fall for her too, and how my family wasn't bad, just misunderstood orphans, sons and daughters of the sky. I didn't mention my desperation to escape. I had to keep a level head and act exactly like my mother. I told them of the 100 days and 100 nights of darkness, and the moon's reign. Our ancestors, who could shift their flesh into beings of light. Rowan's eyes nearly lodged in the back of his head from excessive rolling, while Imogen remained pricklingly silent. But Kaz had listened. Kaz was ready to accept her and sacrifice himself for my brother. Instead of untying him, though, I cut Rowan's restraints, yanking him from the chair. He stumbled when I grasped the scruff of his jacket. Go upstairs and get dressed. The man's expression turned fearful, but he tried to hide it, masking it with his signature smile. Jeez, make your mind up. Do you want to tie me up or not? What are you doing to him? Kaz demanded in a sharp breath, trying to lunge forwards. I shrugged. You said you want to eat actual food. Keeping my gun trained on Rowan, I grabbed one of his shirts from a pile on the floor, throwing it at him. Get dressed, I instructed, when he just kind of held the shirt in front of him like an idiot. Rowan did, throwing the shirt on. I noticed his hands were shaking. Oh, we're going on a date? We're going shopping, I said, throwing him his coat. I couldn't resist a smile when it hit him in the face. Ow! Kaz's expression crumpled, but he nodded slowly. Shopping, he said with a strangled breath. I wasn't sure he believed me. Maybe Kaz thought shopping was code for, I'm going to take him away and murder him without you. When the boy ducked his head, I slowly made my way over to him, kneeling in front of him. Kaz didn't look at me, avoiding my gaze. If you touch him, he whispered, his voice dropping into a hiss, I swear to God, I will kill you myself. You said you need all 3 of us for this fucking sacrifice to work. So don't you dare take him away. I pretended not to see the tears in his eyes. Please, his voice turned pleading. Don't hurt my family. I was confused at first, thinking he meant his family back home. But then it hit me like a wave of ice-cold water when I caught his frantic gaze glued to Rowan, who seemed weirdly calm about the whole situation. These 2 were his family. He had told me about his biological one, his homophobic father who refused to accept his choices, the people he loved. So, Charlie Delacroix had found his own family. I swallowed a lump in my throat. A family I was part of, until I fucked everything up. Kaz was fiercely protective over the 2 of them, almost animalistic. His bound hands grasped for Imogen, his narrowed eyes never leaving my gun, which was pointed at Rowan's head. In Mom's eyes, I was looking at a true vessel for a king. Still, his words stung. Do you trust me? I asked, my own voice catching. Kaz stared down at the floor. Just bring him back safe. Why do you think I won't? I caught a slight smile bleeding into a silent cry. Because you're a fucking psychopath, Kaz whispered. And when he knew that hurt me, his words like pinpricks, he slowly leaned forward in his restraints. I hope you know that when you do this, when you sacrifice us to your celestial god or whatever, he rolled his eyes, that you end up lonely. Kaz followed my gaze, his tone hardening. Because I know that deep fucking down, we are all you have. Kaz was clever. He wanted me to admit he was wrong. That there was someone else, someone, who was making me do this. I was going to ask him if he could prepare the kitchen and wash the dishes, but instead I tightened his restraints. We won't be long, I said, slapping another wad of duct tape over his mouth. Kaz didn't look at me, but he did ask if I could turn on the TV. Rowan, to my surprise, was actually waiting by the door, playing with his keys. I could see multiple household objects he could attack me with, and yet he chose to stay nonchalant. Hurry up, Rowan said, playing with his keys. We can go to the nearest 7-Eleven and get actual food. He shot a smile at Kaz and Imogen, who looked equally panicked. Relax, he told them, side-eyeing my weapon. I noticed he was paying a lot more attention to my gun. Still, Rowan Beck was acting again, this time trying, and failing, to convince his friends I wasn't leading him to his death. It was a good performance, but the second he stepped from my side, I shoved my gun into his back. I caught his expression twisting, the breath leaving his lungs. I'm all good. I'm not planning on running. In fact, Nin and I are gonna have a little chat. Wait, Imogen squeaked before we could leave. I need sanitary towels, she whispered, ducking her head. I caught her teary eyes, the twitch of pain evident between her brows, and something in my heart split apart. I nodded, slowly making my way into the kitchen, boiling water, and preparing a hot water bottle. Imogen didn't thank me, but she didn't protest when I rested it on her stomach. You don't make any sense, she whispered, breaking into a sob. You point a gun at my head, and yet you can't stand to see me in pain. Imogen's eyes searched mine. So, why are you doing this? Instead of responding, I straightened up. It should ease the pain until we're back. I made sure to lock the other two inside the house, jumping into the passenger seat of Kaz's car. Rowan took the driver's side with no complaints, shooting me a wide smile. Do you want to listen to the radio? Ooh, I wonder who's playing tonight. I said no, but maybe he didn't hear me, immediately flicking it on. So, Nin, Rowan began, halfway down the road, molding effortlessly into leather seats. He was squeezing the steering wheel a little too tight for me to believe his I'm actually totally fine facade. Rowan Beck must have thought I was born yesterday. I was waiting for him to do something really stupid, like flash SOS with the lights or shout for help. But instead, his eyes strayed on the road ahead. If that's even your real name. It's Nini, I said. I don't care, he spat back. So why did you ask? After an uncomfortable pause, which was him definitely trying to think of something to one-up me, he snorted. I can't believe we trusted you. I noticed he was squeezing the wheel so hard his fingertips were turning white. He rolled his eyes. I told them there was something wrong with you, but no. Apparently I was the fucking crazy one. I focused on training my gun on him. Sounds like you're mad at them. I caught a sharp glance at my weapon. He was planning something, but I wasn't sure what. If he tried anything, I would kill him and rip out his heart early, and he knew that. Rowan had only one advantage: the outside world. Of course I'm mad at them, he sighed, cranking the radio up. They welcomed a goddamn psycho into our house, and I can't believe I fell for one. Ouch. This guy was really upfront with his feelings, which made him weak. You're going to jail, you know, he hummed when we reached an intersection. I found the soft click, click, click of the indicator oddly soothing. The colorful blur of late-night traffic was comforting. Rowan surprised me with a laugh, his tone turning sing-song. You're going to jail for a long time. I'll visit you, though, since you've got nobody else. Don't say that, I managed through gritted teeth. What? That you're going to jail? He whistled. Sweetheart, I can count your felonies on 2 fucking hands. You are done. Stop, I said. Kidnapping, Rowan announced. That's already like a serious crime. I couldn't move, suddenly paralyzed by his words. Forced inebriation, he continued. You drugged me and took advantage of me. No, I didn't, I shrieked, immediately losing my cool. But you could have, Rowan said, his tone turning sour. You fucked with my head, made me think I actually liked you, and the next thing I know, I'm cuffed to your bed frame. You could have done anything to me. Drive. I didn't realize I was stabbing the barrel of my gun into his stomach until he brushed it away with a sigh. Do you want to explain to a cop why you're waving a gun around, or should I? Now, I'm no Einstein, but playing the villain is most definitely going to get us pulled over. He shot me a look. Honestly, you're embarrassing yourself, dude. He was infuriatingly right. I stuffed my gun in my lap. I'm not doing this because I want to hurt you, I managed to grit out. Oh, sure, he spat sarcastically. Give me a break. I had been expecting the slightest bit of empathy from him. Clearly, I was wrong. You've already told us your weird cult story, he said. You're going to achieve enlightenment from the moon or whatever. Blah, 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 the sky goes dark, blah, 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 100 days of darkness. It's not just the moon, I said, then caught myself before I could spill my heart out. To a guy who despised me. He nodded slowly. Okay, so what is it if it's not the moon controlling your mind? It was my brother. Jonas's survival and our escape from my mother. I didn't say that, though, biting my lip. Just drive, I told him. No more personal questions. He laughed bitterly, turning up the radio. Ooh, I like this song. Cranking up the radio to max, he rocked out to some old-school 2000s group, drumming on the steering wheel with his fists and passionately mouthing the words. Have you heard this song? He yelled over the music. I shook my head, keeping my gaze glued to my lap. Rowan laughed. You're kidding, he said. You've never heard of MCR? No, I said. What? Rowan yelled, viciously headbanging. Dude, MCR were like the band when I was a kid. I was obsessed with them. He held out his wrist, and I noticed something I'd never seen before. A tiny tattoo printed on his finger. When I was in my edgy teen phase, I may have illegally gotten myself a tattoo in a dodgy parlor. He laughed. I did look older for my age. I was intrigued. How old were you? He grinned and my stomach twisted. 14. Rowan didn't speak again until we were in the store. I think he found peace in the music, and, admittedly, I think I did too. Inside the 7-Eleven, I instructed him to grab ingredients for a veggie bolognese. The lights in the store reminded me of the moon, bright and invasive, sending a pulsing pain striking across the back of my skull. I was staring at the dairy aisle, trying to remember Imogen's favorite brand of oat milk, when Rowan appeared next to me, holding a basket full of groceries. I raised my eyebrows at the giant red velvet birthday cake. Since when were you turning 13 years old? Rowan almost looked defensive, leaning away from me, his lip curling. Well, if I'm gonna have my heart torn out, I want cake. And you chose the worst one? He shrugged, copying me, pivoting on his heel and scanning the milk aisle. Rowan was trying to find exactly what I was looking for. Imogen's favorite oat milk. Back in the car, Rowan said casually, picking up a carton and peering at the back, scanning the label. You said you didn't want to hurt us. His breath hitched. Which, if I'm right, means we're not the only ones being held against our will. His words were sharp like the blunt edge of a knife. Jonas, my 20-year-old brother, was all alone, chained inside a cold cell, at the mercy of our psychotic, brainwashed mom. But I do, I said, my voice betraying me, breaking apart. I realized that what I was doing was fucking ridiculous. Imogen Prairie was going to die, and buying her favorite oat milk wasn't going to change that. I abandoned my search, grabbing whole milk instead. When Rowan stepped away from me, I yanked him back, tightening my hold on his wrist. I am going to kill you, Rowan, I said through a steady breath, trying to ignore the jolt in his body, the way he stiffened, his hands forming fists. And then I'm going to offer you to the moon. I turned to him, fashioning my smile, mimicking my mother. She's going to make you shine with her light. I kept his face, cradling his cheeks. And you're going to rule this town as a merciful king. His eyes darkened. Oh, I'll be your king, he teased, his tone souring. Will I wear a crown? Rowan mockingly bowed to me, his grin unnerving. This was the smile of a boy who realized he had nothing to lose. Will I sit under her light? Nin? He mocked, bowing his head as if being crowned. Will I rule my town with an iron fist? When I couldn't speak, he straightened up, rolling his eyes. Give me a fucking break. Instead of responding, I pulled the cake out of his basket, shoving it into his chest. Put it back, I muttered. Mom said I would enjoy having control over potential vessels, but I felt sick. You won't have time to eat it. His head jerked, something splintering in his psyche. I saw it in his eyes. That light I was used to, that loosened the knot in my gut, was oblivion staring back. Still, he was Rowan Beck, the king of building walls around his emotions. He shot me a wide smile, his lip wobbling. I'm sorry. I won't have time. I focused on the cheese section. I'm starting with the preparations tomorrow, I said, my heart in my throat. I couldn't look him in the eye. You'll be dead long before you get to eat it. Rowan never looked angry. I was used to him looking mildly irritated or pissed, but keeping it together. But this was real, raw anger igniting in his eyes. I found myself breathless. He really did look like a king. Well, it's my fucking money, He spat in my ear, his facade slowly coming apart piece by piece. Rowan wasn't nearly as smart as he thought he was, or as nonchalant. This kid was just a scared boy with a loud mouth, and I had just told him I was going to brutally sacrifice him to a celestial light. He snatched the cake from me, his breath cold against my ear. He dragged out his words, slow and methodical and cruel. If I want to buy myself a comfort cake, I will buy myself a comfort cake. Do you fucking understand me? I ignored him, stepping away before I could splinter apart. I caught his gaze flick to an old woman in the bread section. Rowan, I warned under my breath. His lip curled. Go on, he challenged. Shoot me in the middle of a 7-Eleven. He started to back away in slow, dancing strides, throwing his hands up. Ma'am, he said, loud enough to alert the old woman. His eyes didn't leave mine. I'm being held against my will, he spoke through gritted teeth. Please call the cops. Despite my stomach trying to erupt from my throat, I stayed cool, shooting the woman a grin. He's joking. I ran over to him, throwing my arms around him. Rowan stiffened. I nudged him playfully. Babe, I mocked. You can't just say things like that. What will your brother and sister think? Something in his expression twitched, and I saw that last lingering protest bleeding away. Rowan, surprisingly, played along, pulling me closer. You're right, babe, he said through his teeth. How awful of me. I'm such a bad boyfriend. When the old woman walked away, shooting us a sheepish smile, Rowan tried to pull away, but I tightened my grip on him. If you try anything like that again, I murmured, I will shoot you in the fucking head. We bought the groceries, and the whole time Rowan insisted on talking to the cashier for way longer than necessary, very obviously trying to drop hints. Luckily for me, the cashier had her headphones in, only entertaining Rowan's ramblings with nods. When she responded with a simple, cool, he gave up and stormed out of the store, hauling his abnormally sized birthday cake with him. It hit me when we were in the car. He'd already ripped into the cake, stuffing chocolate frosting into his mouth, sniffling through sobs he thought I wasn't noticing. He was getting chocolate all over the wheel. Jonas and Mom had taught me how to suppress my emotions, but I couldn't control the visceral reaction in my body, bile creeping up my throat. It's your birthday, I whispered, and when he only responded with a snort, carving into the cake with one hand and demolishing another slice. Rowan, you're going to make yourself sick. He took a sharp turn, chocolatey slewed dribbling down his chin. Like I care, he spat. You said it yourself. I'm going to die. So, why don't we go on a road trip? When Rowan took another sharp turn, I realized what he was doing. Rowan, I managed to get out. Slow down. He stamped on the gas, squeezing the wheel, his lips breaking to a grin. Fucking make me, Nin. When he stepped on the gas, euphoria slammed into me, ripping me off guard. Like I wanted him to go faster, wanted him to send us plunging into oblivion. The window was open, freezing cold air whipping in my face and stealing my breath. Rowan let out a sob I wasn't expecting, slowing down slightly, the car skidding. You said you don't want to hurt us. His voice broke apart. So you're having second thoughts, right? About killing us? When I didn't respond, retrieving my gun from under the seat and jabbing it in his gut, he broke apart, slowing down, taking another sharp turn on purpose, making sure I whacked my head on the window. I watched him come apart, screaming into the wheel. It hurt me to see his self-sabotage, his attempt at hurting himself. That's what you said. He twisted around to look at me, tears rolling down his cheeks, his breath hitching. I think his own denial was killing him. Because you don't want to hurt us, Nin. "It's your birthday," I said, ignoring his outburst. "That's why you wanted that cake." When he refused to answer, reaching for more red velvet, I gently pulled it away. "How old are you turning?" I asked. 23. He let out a shuddery breath, tripping over his words like poison, as if he hated himself for breaking. "I'm 23, and I've been a nihilistic asshole my whole life, constantly mocking my own existence and dwelling in my own existential hell." Rowan was struggling again, sniffling. "But I'm 23 today, and I'm not even 30 yet. I'm still young, and if I survive, I'll stop being a pretentious ass. I'll stop thinking I'm better than everyone. Fuck!" He was crying now, no longer trying to hide his fear. "I don't want to die," he whispered. I don't want to die." I opened my mouth to speak, but he cut me off with a sob, his chest heaving, tears in free fall. I averted my gaze before I did something I would regret. We were close enough. I could easily wrap my arms around him and give him that comfort he was crying out for. Instead, I stayed stiff in my seat, my stomach twisting into knots. "Every time it's someone's birthday, we get them a wildly incorrect cake." Rowan let out a spluttered laugh. "For my 21st, they got me a cake saying, 'It's a boy.'" I could sense a small smile pricking on my lips. I hadn't had a birthday since I was 17. "How about you?" His question took me off guard. "What?" Rowan shrugged, his gaze on the road. "How do you celebrate your birthday?" I remembered my last birthday. I watched a sea of red pooling at my mother's feet. "I don't." I caught something in his expression, but he didn't speak. When we got home, pushing through the door, he took his time hauling the grocery bags up the steps. I turned to tell him to hurry up and caught his retreating shadow trying to run. But not before I was 2 steps ahead of him, pressing the barrel of my gun against the back of his head, this time hard enough to hurt. I was right about him planning to run, which meant his breakdown in the car was pure pantomime. If Rowan got away, Jonas was dead. I wouldn't be getting that happy ending with my family. But as I dragged him back inside, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't fair that I was feeling this. Why was I sweating? Why were my legs shaking? Why did I want to let him go? The door was wide open, which meant he could easily shout for help. Grabbing my roll of duct tape, I slapped a strip over his mouth, stabbing the barrel harder into his spine. "Get on your knees," I said through clenched teeth, willing myself to stop trembling. I yanked his hands behind his back to tie them, but I wasn't expecting him to fight back. Part of me was in awe at how effortless he twisted, moving like water, as if the moon was already inside him, disarming me in one swift movement. The gun fit in his hands as if it had always belonged there, his grip unnervingly perfect. Ripping off the gag, wincing, he was panting, but unbelievably grinning, wildly, almost feral. "Nin wants to tell us something," Rowan gasped out. "Right, Nin?" When he trained the barrel between my eyes, I stumbled back. "Say it," Rowan gritted out, breathless. "Fucking say it!" I couldn't say it. When I swallowed the words, he pulled the trigger. "Rowan!" Imogen screamed, with Kaz muffling at him to stop. He shot me again. And again. And again. His arm whipped out and he shot an empty round into the door. "It's blank." He choked in an incredulous laugh. It's always been blank, because she doesn't want to hurt us. Rowan let the weapon slip from his hands, his eyes narrowing. Say it, he spat through a breath. Tell us exactly what you feel. I felt my whole body fall limp, my last-ditch effort to save my brother, shattering into nothing. But I couldn't deny the words choking my throat. I don't want to hurt you. Kaz reached for his phone I had kept on the coffee table, but Rowan shook his head. No cops, he said. I want to talk to her. Rowan took a step forward, and I instinctively took one back. Instead of shooting another blank, though, Rowan kicked my gun under the door and gestured to the dining table. Sit. I found my voice glancing at Kaz and Imogen, who looked equally confused. When Imogen tried to lunge forward, Kaz gently dragged her back, murmuring to her. What? I whispered. Rowan sighed, plonking himself down on the floor, crossing his legs. Rowan sighed, plonking himself down on the floor, crossing his legs. Fine. Sit on the floor with me. I did, slumping onto my knees, surprised to find the weight on my shoulders was lighter. After a moment, he shocked me with a laugh. I was right, he said, his own voice betraying him, splintering into a sob. You're being held against your will, too. I didn't respond, lost somewhere between breaking down on the kitchen floor and spilling everything from my lips. Our forced indoctrination into the cult, my mother's brainwashing, and the promise to save my brother. I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating, but at some point Imogen appeared by my side. She grasped my hands, entangling her fingers with mine. Half delirious, I tried to scrub away the markings I had cut into her palm. She was so warm, letting me sob into her shoulder. Kaz didn't speak, but he did make me hot tea. We talked all night, and the three decided they were going to help me save my brother. Rowan didn't leave my side all night, and even when I was sleeping, he insisted on staying with me. I had a chance to deceive him. I had a chance to rip out his heart while he was sleeping, his face uncomfortably pressed into my shoulder. But I was tired, and he was so fucking warm. 3 days later, I was in the back of Kaz's car. Imogen was next to me, her arms wrapped around a shoebox. Kaz had a plan, sort of. The cult was expecting 3 human hearts for the preparation ceremony. So, after a lot of digging and weird looks, he had 3 pig hearts ready for offering. Kaz said pig hearts resembled human hearts, so it should work, in theory. Remember, Rowan spoke up from the passenger seat. He didn't turn around, his gaze glued to the window, late afternoon sunlight setting strands of his hair alight. All you need to do is dump the hearts, grab your brother, and run, he said. We'll have the car ready. Rowan leaned back in his seat with a sigh. If you're right about the cops knowing about the cult and even helping these freaks, then we're on our own. It's okay, Imogen spoke up, grasping my hand. Nin is going to save her brother, and then we'll take him back to our place. Kaz nodded, tapping on the steering wheel. We'll keep him safe, he said, catching my eye. Both of you. Directing Kaz to the rendezvous, my housemate drove me to the edge of Styx Forest, where I'd be meeting Mom. Imogen handed me the box and gave me an awkward hug. I didn't understand their willingness to forgive me. I felt myself melt into her, grateful for the warmth of her sweater, her flowery scent sending my heart into my throat. After everything I did to them, these three still cared. "Come back," Imogen whispered into my shoulder. She didn't let go when I tried to pull back. "If things seem weird, just run away, okay?" She slipped a carving knife from her pocket, and I had to bite back a laugh. "Imogen," Kaz hissed. "How?" "Well, we need a weapon," she insisted. "We can't fight these guys with nothing." Kaz's lip quirked. "I mean, sure," he shrugged. "If you think you can take them." Rowan stayed in the car, his back to me. "Immy, put the knife down," he grumbled. "We're not stooping to these freaks' level." "And you think that won't get us killed?" she whisper hissed. I left them bickering amongst themselves. Leaving the three of them at the clearing, I stepped straight into cult territory. I knew exactly where the carefully laid out traps were, designed to cripple strangers, jumping over a rope stamped into the dirt. Mom instructed me to meet her at the elder tree, under a crescent moon. Tipping my head back, a sliver of moonlight poked through the thick canopy of trees, and I shivered, tightening my grip around the box of pig hearts. I wasn't expecting candlelight under the elder tree, blurred orange lighting up the dim. "Mom?" I started forwards hesitantly, quickening my steps. I wasn't looking where I was going, searching for her familiar ghostly face, when I glimpsed a figure bowed under the tree. Someone was praying. I took another step, and another, until my worn Converse were stepping in something wet, a pooling darkness soaking the ground. I didn't feel the box slip from my hands, or hear my own cry slice through the silence. I should have known. Still lit candles, blood that was warm, still wet, soaking into the ground. I was on my knees suddenly, retching, sobbing into familiar sandy curls that were so distinct, so familiar. Bile shot up my throat. My trembling hands didn't feel real, trying to find a pulse. Trying to find his face. Jonas's body had been perfectly laid out, his head severed from his torso. He was another sacrifice, another body left to rot. I screamed for my mother, pulling my brother's body to my chest and holding him, stroking his skin covered in markings. Luhar, Nathur, Villalua. Mom! I didn't trust my own voice, my broken screech ripping through my lips. I pulled what was left of my brother to my chest, rocking him, burying my face in his hair. I could have saved him. I could have fucking saved him. I was so close. So close. Mom! I screamed, my throat was burning, my chest aching. Mommy didn't do this to me. She didn't. She couldn't have. Nin. I was shrieking, trying to justify my brother's death, trying to scream for my mother, when warm arms wrapped around me, pulling me into a clumsy embrace. I didn't want it. I didn't want him anywhere near me, a constant fucking reminder that I chose him over my own flesh and blood. The one person I had left. I tried to shove him away, my voice breaking into words that didn't make sense, words that should have hurt him, words I instantly regretted. But he was warm. When his arms wrapped around me once again, this time harsher and yet closer, an anchor keeping me from well and truly falling, plunging into despair. He smelled like cheap cologne and stale coffee, but I found myself clinging onto it, clinging onto him, and letting myself fucking break. When my cries were raw and broken and dying out, the muted world came back to me in sputters. I was half aware of Rowan kneeling in front of me, his head buried in my shoulder. He was trembling, or maybe I was trembling. The two of us felt both right and wrong, and losing myself in his smell, his heavy breaths and murmurs that everything was going to be okay. I realized he was home. Bathed in moonlight that bounced off him, and I was so thankful it did. Rowan Beck didn't sympathize with me, and that was okay because I didn't want his pity. But he did pull me to my feet, steadying me when my legs gave way. Nin. His voice didn't feel real, waves crashing against rocks. Look at me. In my half-delirious state, I did, my chest heaving, my stomach contorting. I couldn't fucking breathe. I couldn't breathe, and his eyes were what caught me off guard. Brown, with hints of amber like orange. We can walk away, he said softly. You and me. We can go back to the car and not look back. You can come stay with us and there won't be questions or answers because we want you in our family. He laughed, spluttering on a sob. You don't have to go back there. You can stay with us. Twin footsteps behind me set my body into fight or flight. But they were familiar, hesitant at first, then quickening. Before I knew what was happening, Imogen's face was buried in my shoulder, and Kaz's arms awkwardly pulled me into a hug. It felt wrong, but oh, so right. I felt loved, warm, safe. The three of them were like a cocoon, shielding me from my raw reality. Rowan wrapped his arm around my shoulder, the three of them dragging me away from my brother's body. I caught Rowan's glance at Jonas, his eyes glittering with tears. He looked away, his lip wobbling. Let's go home, was all he said, leading the way back to the car. Imogen was quick to pull my head onto her lap in the back seat, and I remember the lull of the car swaying me back and forth. The three of them took me back to their home, pulled me upstairs, and tucked me into my bed. I didn't speak for a long time, but I didn't need to. Days went by. Weeks. Months. Imogen brought me meals and drinks, sometimes curling into bed with me, running her fingers through my hair, telling me stories. Kaz sat by my bed like a personal therapist, repeatedly telling me I was okay. I was safe. Nobody was going to hurt me. Rowan kept his distance for a while. But then, he started to appear in my doorway, scowling his usual scowl. Do you want to maybe watch a movie? Turned into the two of us binge watching everything. I'm not sure when it was that I turned to him for emotional relief. When I found myself wrapped around him, my head nestled on his shoulder. When I stopped resenting him for being here, while my brother wasn't. The memory jerked, pulling me back to the real world. Back to lying under the moon's light as she hauled me out. My voice had been burned from my throat, my body a puppet cut from its strings. I was partially aware of her filling my blood, hitting every dead nerve ending, entangling around my skull and delving into my brain. Rowan was still there, his breath in my ear choked with hysterical giggles. Wow, he chuckled. Who would have thought that the whole time you were the fucking problem? Rowan leaned closer. That you ruined the lives of 3 strangers and inserted yourself into their little family. He jumped back. It's kind of poetic. I bit back a cry when his fingers tiptoed down my arm. Funny how that works, huh? With no mouth, no voice, I couldn't respond. I want to show you one more thing, he sang. It's what she showed me, Nin. He sighed, his eyes basking in her light. It's what turned me into this. Suddenly, she wasn't subtle anymore, speaking directly through him, his voice turning melodic, watery. Oh, darling, you should have seen his face. His mind broke into pieces, and I put him back together. Again. Rowan leaned closer, her light seeping from him, scalding my skin. Again and again and again. Until he stopped screaming, begging me for mercy. She mocked his cry. And finally, let me in. He prodded me in the face, giggling. Just like you did when you finally offered me young Rowan as a king. The moon gripped my chin, forcing me to look at him. His lips grazed mine, chuckling. Ask me how I died, Nin. Please. His head tipped back, lips parting in a moan. It's all he wants to hear. Oh, his tortured mind and soul wants to hear you say it. I didn't have to ask. The memory was already slamming into me. 3 figures in our doorway. Each of them, I knew. Dex, Noah, and Harry. 3 of the Moon Cult's brainwashed followers. We're not interested. Kaz stood in front, his arms folded. Leave. When Noah pulled out a gun, shooting Kaz dead, the world spun around. Imogen crumpled into a heap, and I didn't even see the bullet hit her. Rowan! I only found my voice when Rowan was bleeding out in my arms, his eyes flickering back and forth, blood spilling from his lips. I told him not to speak and not to be scared. Holding him to my chest, I told him that no matter what, I was going to save him. The Moon Swallowers left quickly, knowing exactly what I was going to do. Wrapping them in a knitted blanket, I pulled off of Rowan's bed. I dumped their bodies in Kaz's car and drove to the town lake. Mom wanted vessels for royals. She wanted human skins for the moon's light. I carved her name into the dirt and my plea to her light. Even coming back as her puppets, her royals, kings and a queen drenched in blood, they would still be alive. So we could keep living together. Our family. A family I didn't know I wanted, no, needed, until they were gone. Luhar, Nathur, Velilua. Sobbing, my trembling fingers kept messing up. I carved out each of their hearts just like the moon told me to. Luhar, Nathur, Velilua. The words tangled on my tongue, exploding into sobs. Luhar, Nathur, Velilua. Picking up Kaz's body, I dropped him into the lake. Scooping Imogen into my arms, I carefully lowered her into the shallows before crawling over to Rowan, who was so still, so cold, his dead eyes tracking the dark sky. I bent down and kissed him, an eternal binding that I wasn't letting him go.